going to go over today is the final data validation process. It's in the toolbox. And before we do that, what we recommend you do is to make a backup copy of your toolbox. So we've imported a couple data sets into the toolbox. We want to make sure that before we do the final data validation step, we have a backup copy of our toolbox. So from the opening screen of the toolbox, we have this make backup copy of toolbox button on the main switchboard, and another make backup copy of toolbox button is on the final data validation form as well. We're going to run from the one that's on the opening screen of the toolbox, and when we click on this button, we get this navigation screen, and it says, where do you want to put this backup copy of the toolbox? What we recommend doing is to put the backup copy onto an external location. So if something was to happen to your computer, you would have that backup copy saved somewhere else. So perhaps you would put it on a server, or you would put it on a memory stick. So in my case, I have a memory stick that I want to put this on, which is right here. So I'm going to click on that. And what we also recommend doing is to make a folder that is going to store all of your backups. So I made this toolbox backup folder on my memory stick where I'm going to keep all of my backup files of the toolbox. So I'm going to open that folder. And there's nothing in it yet since I haven't backed up my toolbox yet. And you'll also notice the file name here. So the way this works is it gives you the date of the backup as well as the time of the backup. So this keeps a record of when that file was backed up, just in case you mess something up on a certain day, you want to go back to one day, you know what date each of the files were backed up. So once you do all that, we click Save. It says backup was successful and saved, and it tells you where it was saved at. So we click OK on that. And then you get the second message box, and this is about running compact and repair on your toolbox. So what happens when you work with the toolbox over time is it gets kind of big. And the reason is that every import that goes into the toolbox makes this empty space. And so it's a good idea to run compact and repair every now and then to decrease the file size of the toolbox. One thing it does do is that it closes any open forms. So you want to make sure that you do this when everything is closed. If you don't want to do it, you can say no, and that doesn't affect the backup that's already been made. But I'm going to go ahead and say yes to decrease the file size. So I say yes, and what's going to happen is it's going to close the toolbox and restart it. So watch what happens. It's going to take a second, and then you barely notice it, but for a second it closed the toolbox and then it reopened it. We imported the data into the toolbox the first time we did the initial data review step. There's also an intermediate data review step, and you can do that if you have additional information that came in after you archive the data that you want to flag additional data from. Or if you simply forgot to flag something, you're like, oh man, I wish I would have flagged that. How do I do it? I'm not going to go over that in many details since many people don't do it, but I'm going to show you where you can access that form just in case you need to do it. So it's not on any of the fast tracks. The only way you can access it is from the main switchboard. So you click on Work from Main Switchboard, and it's this logbook and external information data flagging button. And that's just going to let you flag additional data that you might not have flagged during the import process. And there's an SOP for it, of course, and we're always there to help you with it if you want to use that button, but we're not going to go over that today. So to get back to the wizard, I'm going to click here to get back to the wizard, which is, the wizard means the opening screen in the toolbox. So we're back in the opening screen, and to get to the final data validation forms, we use the continuous or meteorological data fast track, and we click on final data validation. Final data validation process involves reviewing data you've already flagged, and most likely you want to only invalidate data that you've already flagged in most cases. What happens when you invalidate data is you assign what's called an AQS null value code, and the data that you invalidate are excluded from charts, reports, and AQS files that you generate with the toolbox. And AQS ready file that you generate with the toolbox, an invalidated record will appear as a null value with the invalidation code that you assign to it. It's important to complete the final data validation, even if you're not planning on submitting the data to AQS, because invalid data are still going to be in the toolbox reports and charts, and a lot of those invalid data make the charts meaningless. Like, it's also important that you have your logbook ready to record information about the final data validation process, and you also want to have your field logbook available so that you can look at it and see why you flagged that data, and that's going to determine what AQS null value code you're going to use. You should complete the final data review process at least quarterly, but I would do it more often because it's a lot easier to do the process when you're recently archived the data. It's fresh in your mind why you flagged that data. So with me, I would do it after every import. So every 2 weeks, I do the final data validation process because it's a lot easier to remember why you flagged that data right after you did it. And it's a lot easier to do less data at a time than more data at a time. So the way this form works is it's broken up into 3 different areas. So we've got an area for continuous monitoring, and then we've got an area for filter data, and we've got an area for meteorological data. We're not going to go over this filter method section because this training is focused on continuous and meteorological data. So we're not going to go over this specifically, but the process is very similar to continuous and net. And of course, it's referenced in the SOP if you have filter-based data, how to do that. So we're going to work on the ozone and the PM2.5 and the meteorological data that we imported during the last 2 modules. So we're going to start with our ozone data. And the way this form is set up is these gray buttons need to be completed in the order here. So we've got 1 through 5. So you need to complete these in the order that's listed. So the first thing we got to do is we have to select the site ID. So the site ID, we click on the drop down. For my ozone is S46. And then I move on to sampler ID. And that's INO3 for my ozone. And pollutant is ozone. And sampling year is 2013. I've only imported 1 year, only 2013 shows. When you do that, date range is populated automatically. So the date range is only 8/8 through 8/22, and that's because I've only imported 2 weeks of ozone data into the toolbox. If I had imported a bunch of data, this range would include all of the data I've ever imported. So you might need to adjust this depending on what data range you're doing the final data validation process for. And then to the right, the chart shows up. So as you can see, this chart is relatively meaningless because of these hugely negative values that are right here. So in order to make this chart meaningful, we need to invalidate some of those data points so we can see what's going on up here. One thing about the chart is these yellow points that we see, these are flagged data. So these are data that we already flagged, but we've not yet invalidated, and that's why they're still showing up on the chart. So we're going to start by invalidating these very negative values because we know those are errors. And you can do it several ways. So we've got several buttons here. We can look at all of the data in this particular data range. We can look at both the flagged and the not flagged data, or we can just look at the flagged data. So I'm just going to look at the flagged data because I want to get rid of these -699 values. So I click on View Only Qualified Data, and I get this screen. And what this screen shows is all of the data that I have flagged during the initial data review process. And all of these are yellow, because the way that these screens work is that any flagged data shows up as yellow. So all of these are yellow because all of these data are flagged. I can see my -6999 values, and I definitely want to invalidate those. So I'm going to start by doing that. So to invalidate that data, what I need to do is I need to click in this HUS null code column for that particular record. So the first -6999, I click in HUS null code. What happens then is I get a drop-down arrow. And that drop-down arrow allows me to assign the invalidation code that I want to assign to that data. So if I click on the drop-down, I get a list of the HUS null value codes that are available. And I need to decide which one I want to use for my data. So this shows the out of range. So the R is out of range value. And the HD15 is when the two concentrations were different by 15 parts per billion. So I think that what happened here is that something went wrong with my machine. So I'm going to do this machine malfunction. You can use the scroll bar to see all of the options available. So you'll see there's quite a few. And that's why we said keep your logbook handy, because you might have written something in your logbook like, oh, someone came in and vandalized the site. So you would have that in your logbook, and then you could choose the proper code here. I'm going to choose machine malfunction. And what happens when I do that is this gets grayed out, and that indicates that it has now been invalidated. So this -699 value is not going to show up in HUS reports anymore. That's going to show up instead as a null value with the HUS null code of AN. There's a keyboard shortcut here. You can do the Control' key, and that copies the record from a previous row into the next row. So on your keyboard, you can press Control' if you want to use the same invalidation code for the next record. So I'm going to do that, and that copies that AN down into the next column. So I don't exactly remember what this L1Z flag is. So I need to look at the SOP, because the SOP has a list of what each of the toolbox flags means at the very last page of the SOP. So I need to figure out what L1Z is, because I can't remember. So I'm going to open up the SOP. I'll go to the last page, and here is the list of qualifiers. They're in alphabetical order. So L1Z was the out of range zero check. And I probably could have looked at my logbook as well, but you can also use the SOP if you know what these flags mean. Let's look at that again. So that means that my zero check failed, and that data is probably not valid. So I'm going to invalidate the failing QC check. So let's look through the list and see what would pertain to a failing QC check. So here is one, poor quality assurance results. That describes it pretty well, so I'm going to use this, poor quality assurance results. These HD15, the best way, since it's about variance between 2 points, is to look at a chart. So I want to look at the chart and see what's going on with these HD15. So if I close this screen, I'm taken back to the chart, and now we see that the chart has been updated. So you'll see that those points that I invalidated, now they're showing up as gaps. So right here, there's a gap in the chart, and that's where those -6999 values used to be. Now we can actually see the data clearly, and I don't see a huge amount of variance between these points. So I'm not too concerned about them. There's nothing in my logbook that would indicate something went wrong with my sampler. So I don't think I want to invalidate those. Just to double check, I'm going to look at all of the data around it in a more of a spreadsheet format, just to make sure that that's what I don't want to invalidate those points. So to do that, I can use this view all data, and that's going to show me all of the data instead of just the flag data. So let's do that. As you can see, it is similar. The yellow ones are the ones that we have flagged with the toolbox flag showing here. The ones that are gray are the ones that are flagged and invalidated. So I'm just going to scroll through the data and make sure that I don't see any out of variance, nothing that would really concern me. Just the -699 values that we invalidated. So this looks pretty good. I don't have any reasons to invalidate these. So I'm going to leave the HUS null code empty, and that means the data are still valid. So, done for now with the data validation process for ozone. So I'm going to close the screen. And now I'm going to write down in my database logbook that I went through the final data validation process for ozone from 8/8/2013 through 8/22/13. And I'm going to record that I invalidated one record due to failing zero check. Validated two records due to very negative out of range values. And it's really important that you write this down in your logbook, because let's say you didn't invalidate anything. So you look through your data and everything's valid, but you don't have any other record that you went through that other than what you wrote down in your logbook. So like 2 weeks down the road, you're saying, did I do that? Did I validate my data or not? And that's why you look at your logbook and say, oh yeah, I went through the process. Everything was good. I didn't need to invalidate anything, and I've got it logged in my logbook. That's how the process works.